Hi dandelions! Before I begin on the topic that I want to discuss tonight, which is one that I've been thinking about for several days now and wanting to talk about, I'm just going to let the tarot enthusiasts among you know how the rest of the tarot trainee course is going to pan out, so that you guys have an awareness of what we're going to focus on next and such. So basically the next lesson that I'm going to go ahead with, which should be out either tomorrow night or the night after I'm hoping, is the court cards, which are the only cards that we haven't covered yet. Then from there we're going to go on to deepening understanding of the cards. So this is going to involve symbolism and reading for yourself the pictures in the tarot cards. I'm going to give you some meditation and visualization techniques to be getting on with so that you can understand how to bond with your deck in a more all-encompassing way. Then we'll go on to reversals and how to read them, whether or not you should read them, the ways in which people do read the cards when they're reversed. Some advice on how to read for yourself and how to read for other people. So that might touch on ethics, but it's just going to be sort of general advice in the main to help you to get the best out of a reading. And then we'll go on to some simple spreads as well, just to round it off nicely so that you have sort of a good feel for how you can progress and begin to read people's cards and read your own cards. Okay, so that's how that's going to sort of play out, and it's coming to that middle stage now, and I've really enjoyed doing it so far, and thank you to everyone who's been along for the ride, and particularly those of you who have messaged me as well or left comments to say that you've enjoyed the course, because that really has meant everything to me. I hope the shadow on the wall isn't distracting you, by the way. I am filming this one from my bed because I've had a super hard day and I just feel like sitting somewhere really, really soft and comfortable. So I normally sit on like a big floor cushion in front of my bookcase, but for today I just felt like I really wanted to actually sit on my own bed, so I am doing so. But the light is not so great here, so I hope it's not too distracting. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today was really just the result of reading, watching a television programme a few nights ago when I couldn't sleep. And I was up pretty late just watching TV with my boyfriend, and we ended up watching this programme which was predominantly about Tai Chi and practitioners of Tai Chi and what it's used for, what it means, its cultural significance and so on. But it also went a little bit into Tai Chi's connection with Kung Fu and other martial arts. And there was a guy on this programme, and he's known as the Wandering Taoist in some circles. He's been living in China for 25 years, even though he was English, I believe he was, or possibly Australian, I can't remember. But certainly not from around there. And he travelled to China to study Qigong and Kung Fu under a master. And he's been a Qigong practitioner for 25 years now. His study has really deepened, and it's really a profound and central spoke of his life. And the television presenter was having quite an in-depth discussion with this guy, and he said to her, you know, when I began practicing Qigong 25 years ago as a novice, I wanted to feel better. That was what I was waiting for, and that was what I was aiming for. 25 years later, as a Qigong master, I can tell you that I do not feel better, but I do feel more. And it really got me thinking about my own relationship with spirituality and its connection with my emotions. And I suppose I always felt like I am a spiritual being because I have always kind of felt more in a lot of ways. And I don't mean that in a self-righteous sense, but I think a lot of people maybe watching this will understand what I mean when I say that the big things like sex, death and religion, consciousness, the existentialist dilemma, that kind of thing, became of central importance to me a lot sooner than maybe it did to other people. And death was something that I thought about from quite a young age, and the concept of God was something that I picked up on and kind of thought about and invested myself into at a really early age. And I think also that my mum always said that I did feel things very deeply, that I often went off into my own world, that I went off into trances, and that I was affected by things really profoundly, whereas other children would very much take things in their stride. And I think that's why I've always believed that I was attracted to the idea of some kind of spiritual practice, and that I was invested very much in learning more about theology and about how different cultures kind of experience and translate God, or their relationship with the subconscious, or their relationship with death, whatever it is. Whereas when I heard that guy say that on that program, I kind of thought to myself, well, yeah, in one way, I suppose if you feel more than the average bear, and if you invest yourself so much more mentally and emotionally into stuff that a lot of other people might just accept as part of the circle of life, whatever, then you are likely to want to have some kind of spiritual practice or engagement in spirituality. But by the same token, my spiritual path has enabled me to feel more as well. So it's kind of that I'm spiritual because I feel more because I'm spiritual kind of thing. It's kind of six of one and half a dozen of the other. And I think that we should never be afraid to allow our spirituality to make us feel more. And I always feel sometimes that in parts of my spiritual practice, I've wanted to use spirituality as a way to make me feel better. Whereas I needed to accept really that spirituality was never going to make me feel better about the things I was seriously worried about. You always come back to feeling a sense of worry or a sense of dread or a sense of depression because you can't be 100% positive all the time. And often I feel nowadays that when I'm in a really positive place and when everything's going right for me and I feel a deep sense of contentment and balance, I always train myself to remember that a negative time is coming. And that's not because I'm a pessimist and it's not because I'm a miserable, morbid idiot. It's because I accept that nothing stays the same. And I accept that life is that cycle of ups and downs, like the Wheel of Fortune in tarot. You need to accept that life is a gamble, life is a risk, life is unpredictable. And then when those good moments come, you need to really suck the marrow out of them because, of course, they're not going to last forever. And so I think you can take that in a very fatalistic way and get very droll about it and kind of think, well, everything's good now, but everything's going to turn to shit in a minute because that's life. And kind of not, you risk not embracing the moment. You risk not loving that happy, joyous moment because you're so scared of losing it that all you ever think about is losing it, losing it. I'm going to lose it. I don't deserve it. Things are going too well. Somebody's going to die. Something's going to happen. I'm going to lose it all. And that prevents you from enjoying the moment. And I think that a lot of the time with spirituality and with my response to my own spiritual practice, I used to be afraid when things were going really well, or in life in general, in different aspects of life. I'd be afraid of something going so well because I was afraid of losing it. Whereas now I train myself to grasp the moment because I know I'm going to lose it, and I know eventually I'm going to lose everything because biologically my cells will deteriorate. So I find a lot of comfort in the concept of death as well, and I find a lot of comfort in the concept of embracing something because you know it's going to pass. So now I don't ask my spirituality to make me feel good. I simply ask my spirituality to make me feel more. And I know that it does that in abundance. I know that I have grown exponentially as a human being by being able to accept the challenges in my spirituality as opportunities. And I think that's the central spoke of a lot of things that I've learned, particularly in the last year and a half, about the connection between the word opportunity and the word challenge. And I did a tarot reading recently where I actually asked a woman to decide for herself what the relationship is for her in her life between the word challenge and the word opportunity. And I often ask my queerants to think about things like this because two words can end up meaning the same thing. And I think there are a couple of languages, in fact, I think Chinese may be one, but don't quote me on it, where I think chance and challenge or opportunity and challenge are essentially the same word, or they come from the same etymological stem. And I think that is amazing as well, because I think it's opportunity and challenge can technically be seen as the same thing. It's all about perception. And I think as well my perception towards the spiritual journey has changed. I'm not asking it for anything now. I'm going into it and I'm moving with it, and I'm not so afraid to do that. So I think, fear can be broken down more when we have a sense that everything is chaotic and nothing is for certain and we can't keep hold of that beautiful thing. We have to appreciate and respect that beautiful thing because decay is inherent within it. So I don't know if that's a little bit too deep for people, but that was where I went with it when he said that. It was so profound to me that I kind of felt like I needed to share my ideas and kind of the springboard that it threw me from with everybody else a little bit. And I think with lessons as well, this is true in life, in all facets of life, not only on the spiritual journey for those of us who have a spiritual practice. But when we learn a lesson, we always feel like that lesson has been learned and we need to put it in a box. We've strengthened from it, we've grown from it, and now we need to put it in a box and it's over. When we find ourselves returning to the same lesson some months or some years later, the desire is to punish ourselves for that, or feel weak for that, or mock ourselves or berate ourselves, or think, Jesus Christ, why am I having to learn this bloody lesson again? I've learned it before, I should have put that in a box, I should have, absorbed that wisdom and moved on with my life. Why am I here again? And I think it kind of promotes a negative feeling inside of us that we're stupid, that we didn't learn it the first time, or we feel weary, we feel like we're on some kind of a cycle that we can't actually get off, like an annoying spiritual carousel where we're always being brought back to the same thing and we don't understand why we can't progress beyond. But I think the thing that I've really learned about my lessons is that a lesson deepens indefinitely, and understanding deepens indefinitely. And now, instead of feeling resentful when the same lesson comes up for me and I kind of feel small in the face of it, or I feel humble to the point of weakness, or I feel pathetic, now I don't hate the lesson, I don't want it to go away, and I don't feel stupid for not taking it on. I realise that sometimes when a lesson comes along again, I learn on a new level, I absorb on a deeper level, because I am a different person. I inherently, it's obvious, I've grown. If I took a lesson, for example, about the value of friendship, or a lesson about the fear of death, whatever it is, and I absorbed that lesson and I remembered it and it was of significance to me, if I feel the same terror and I need to learn the same lesson, or I make the same mistake with a friend and I need to learn the same lesson a year later, it's not the same me learning that lesson. I evolved from that lesson the first time, and I did everything in my life differently for the last 12 months as a result of learning that lesson the first time. Now, who am I the second time I learn it? Why has it come along again? And who am I now to absorb it in a new way? I think understanding deepens and deepens, and I think it's incredible. It's like a coastal shelf after a coastal shelf almost, with the tide bashing against it. It deepens our persona and it deepens our sense of ourselves. It hits our subconscious in a fresh way and it can move us to that next level. So, I think sometimes lessons that are learned over and over again, or lessons that revisit, can feel very challenging and very arduous. And I've seen a few people lately going through very harsh spiritual lessons and harsh lessons in life that they're weary of and that they wish would go away. And I think particularly with relationships, don't berate yourself too much if you find you need to learn a lesson again. I think that's important. I think that obviously lessons need to be learned. If you are perpetuating a vicious cycle, then you must move on from that vicious cycle. Otherwise, life is going to stagnate in a way that's going to be painful for you or counterproductive. However, we don't just learn a lesson once and move on from it. Sometimes it takes a few times, like a battering ram, for us to finally get that door open. And you shouldn't hate yourself for that, and you shouldn't disrespect yourself for that. It's just the way life goes down, And I think it gives us a chance as well to flex our spiritual muscles. Sometimes, and I've said this in other videos, it's so important not to distinguish too much between your spiritual life and the rest of your life, or the magical life and the mundane life, as I like to call it, the high and low concerns. They actually meld together and they actually are one and the same. You can infuse spirituality into every facet of your being and every aspect of your life, both waking and sleeping. And I think sometimes if you come across a particularly challenging situation that is mundane or prosaic or domestic or to do with work or whatever, you can infuse your sense of spiritual learning into that. You can give yourself a chance to flex your spiritual muscles by looking at it and thinking, okay, what am I learning here from a spiritual perspective? I know it's an issue I'm having with a work colleague or whatever it is, but what am I learning from a spiritual perspective here? And not only that, but what can I take what I've already learned and already absorbed from my spiritual practice and inject it into this situation now so that I make sure that I make the correct decision for me? Particularly when it comes to the way we treat other people that we have to be around, we can't get away from them. They're work colleagues or they're family members, there's a familial obligation, or you don't want to make things awkward in the workplace. You can bring your spiritual understanding to this situation. You can think about what your spiritual practice tells you you should be doing in order to treat this person with fairness and diplomacy, but also make sure that you are getting your voice heard, You can take spirit into every aspect of your life, and I think it can improve every aspect of your life. And that's something that I used to forget a lot. That's something that I used to really make a distinction on, the difference between who I was in my spiritual time and my spiritual life and who I was in the rest of life. And that was a mistake. I think it's like people people talk quite often about world peace and about compassion. And one or two people have said, and I think it's become, quite a statement now for the contemporary world, when people say it's completely wrong to talk about needing world peace and needing compassion and needing understanding between human beings if you don't actually practice what you preach in your own life, with your own family, with your own friends. And that is so true. A change of consciousness begins on a very, very small scale. It's okay and it's understandable and it's commendable to talk about how the world needs to change in XYZ way in order for consciousness to expand and love to become all encompassing, and everything to be right with the world, and for people to treat each other with respect. But have a look at how you treat people in your own life, and how you treat yourself in your own life, and how you conduct yourself in those ordinary, mundane, prosaic kind of situations that you often don't feel you need to bring your spiritual self to the table with, because it's not something that instantly strikes you as a spiritual moment, or is something that you need your spiritual energy to get yourself through. I think a lot of witches on YouTube particularly, I think, are fantastic at not creating a barrier between their spiritual self and who they are with the rest of their mundane or prosaic or everyday concerns with other aspects of their life, like relationships, home, work. I think that there are a lot of pagans and witches, particularly on YouTube, the videos that I watch, where they talk a tremendous amount of sense about bringing spirituality to every facet of your life. And that's something else that I thought, all situations give you a chance to flex your spiritual muscles, as it were, and work something out for yourself to deepen your spiritual practice, as well as to improve and neaten and tidy up your life and make sure that you don't have too much undue stress in your life. And lastly but not leastly, I think that it's very important for me at this point in my own spiritual journey to remember that the universe does not owe me a sense of hope. As my favourite atheist Richard Dawkins once said, the universe does not owe you a sense of hope. And I think that's a very profound thing to think about, because even as a pantheist, even as somebody who doesn't believe in an interventionist Godhead who actually kind of listens to my thoughts and my prayers and interacts with me on a personal level and can have some control over what goes on in my life, even as somebody who doesn't believe in that and who believes that in fact divinity is threaded throughout my being and throughout everything else, and that everything, both apparently inherently good and apparently inherently bad, is God, and that there's nothing beyond that, even I am sometimes angry at something. I'm angry at something and I don't know what it is. I mean, if you're a monotheist and you believe that your God is interventionist and that you can communicate with him on some level, then I suppose, it seems more rational to be angry with God, because you feel that God can have some standing in how your life goes down. And if God kills off one of your relatives, or doesn't allow your job interview to go correctly, or, has left you impoverished for 20 years, I suppose you would feel that there's some sense in being angry, even though you may try and convince yourself that God works in mysterious ways and God has a plan for you, even though you may not understand that plan at this moment. I suppose anger may seem in some way rational, but I think even atheists and even pantheists, even people with a very distinctly different worldview, can sometimes feel angry. I'm sometimes angry at my spiritual pathway. Maybe not so much now, but I think in the past few years I remember several times where I've thought, this shouldn't be so difficult for me to process, because I've been on this spiritual journey for a long time and I've attempted to progress and I've attempted to deepen my understanding. And I suppose, like I said at the beginning of this video, why the fuck don't I feel better? How dare I not feel better? I've put the work in. Why do I still feel tormented? Why do I still feel afraid? And then I always come back to this idea that, the universe doesn't owe me a sense of hope. Divinity doesn't owe me a sense of hope. My spiritual practice is not there just to give me a sense of joy and hope and comfort. I don't want to believe in something or invest in something purely because it gives me hope. I think that is quite a shallow and fickle ambition for a spiritual journey. I want my spiritual journey to take me everywhere and make me feel everything. I want it to make me absorb and enjoy the process of trauma as much as it makes me enjoy and absorb joy itself. So I think it's important to remember that your spiritual pathway is not just there to bolster you. It's not just there for you to lean on. It is a learning process, and it can be arduous and it can be challenging, and you need to learn to accept and love that part of it too. Because if you're just looking for the good times and the highs constantly, you're never going to feel completely fulfilled, and you're always going to feel like you're working towards something that's never coming to you, and a sense of resentment will set in. It's only human, but it takes a change in perspective to understand that even the lowest and most terrifying parts of the spiritual journey, like your struggles, your crises, your ambivalence, your inability to understand something, even when you've studied hard or meditated to death and you feel like you should have reached that next plateau but you can't quite get onto it, those parts of the journey that include some kind of difficulty should be just as enjoyable to you and should be relished by you just as much as those high points where, you know, you really get those feelings of awe, that dark joy as you realise that you're one with everything in the universe, that kind of thing. The spiritual highs, I think they're called. You know, I think that both the negative and the positive should be taken as part of the overall spiritual journey itself, and that you should absorb it all on an equal footing. And also, I'd like to just talk about, with regard to balance and realism and spirituality, which I feel this video has been all about, and that I feel the points I've raised have been just trying to put forth to you my ideas about balance and realism, and about not expecting too much of yourself, and not expecting your spirituality to be something for you that it can never be, but in fact to kind of inject it and involve it in your life in a way that works for you, but doesn't kind of make you deny the fact that you're still in this physical realm and there are still things you're going to need to deal with. Sometimes it's very difficult to decide whether or not to push forward with the spiritual journey or pull back. On my blog, I've written once or twice about spiritual slumps and how to deal with them. And I think this is particularly important for pagans who follow a polytheistic standpoint, or, you know, have many gods in their pathway with whom they commune or anything like that. I've seen videos and blog posts in the past from people who have a patron god and goddess with whom they regularly communicate, and when they feel that they need to step back from their spiritual journey, when they feel that they're going through a slump, or that there are other things that they need to consider or prioritise, when they feel that they can't practice to the extent that they were before, they feel an enormous sense of guilt, or they feel terrified that they're going to lose their connection to their spiritual pathway. They feel terrified that their gods or deities will turn their backs on them, that kind of thing. And I also think that people who've been invested in the spiritual pathway for a long time are terrified to admit that they may need to step back, or they may need to explore or reassess what's going on, even that they may need to reassess the label that they're using. Sometimes when you're in a crisis in any aspect of your life, pushing yourself into your spiritual practice helps you. It helps me. Sometimes when I feel that things are really tough or I'm really confused, spiritual practice is the first thing on the list of ideas to help me reconnect with myself, to centre myself, find my core being, and go forward in a way that strengthens and fortifies me. At other times, there is not as much space for spiritual practice, or in fact it might be spiritual practice itself that's making me come to a little bit of upheaval. Things begin to feel tumultuous because spiritual practice has taken over and I need to step back. I think pushing forward, pushing yourself into the spiritual journey, making it more intense because you need that comfort from it, you need that sustenance from it, that's understandable, but pulling back is just as acceptable too, and sometimes it's important to do that. And if you are on a polytheistic journey and you do feel that, you know, your gods are going to have some kind of a problem with you stepping back or not communicating or anything like that, I think you really need to trust your instincts. I think you need to believe in the foundational love, that loving core that you feel between you and whoever or whatever it is that you communicate with, or that you feel bridges that space between your conscious realm and the unconscious realm, the godly realm, the other dimension, whatever it is. Believe in that core love that you have between you and that deity. Will that deity or that spirit guide, whatever, understand that you need to pull back? You know, for the importance of the relationship itself, in the interest of the spiritual journey itself, you need to pull back. You need to have not such a heavy involvement so that later on you can come back fortified, refreshed, renewed, refueled, that kind of thing. I think that guilt, of course, it's sometimes the first response, or a feeling that you're not as spiritual as you thought you were, or that you're not as strong as you thought you were, or you can't hack it, whatever it is. But sometimes spirituality just needs to be put on the back burner. It doesn't mean that you're any less spiritual. It means that a spiritual experience will hit you when you least expect it, because you're not going looking for it. You're not investing yourself into it to the point of stress or anxiety. So I think that's important as well, pushing forward and stepping back. It's it's a balance, and you need to strike it somewhere, and you need to do what's right for you. You need to do what's right for you, free of guilt, because guilt is just clouding your judgment when it comes to this kind of thing. And the only way that we can invite true realism and balance and perseverance into our spiritual journey is if we take the foot off of our own neck. I think we need to just be kind to ourselves and understand that sometimes the priorities need to change in order for you to then regain your perspective and move forward with a greater sense of balance and strength. Okay, that's me wittering on, and now I'm stopping. Thank you so much for listening, guys, and I will be back with Trainee Tarot soon. Bye.